As the Souls community anxiously awaits Demon Souls remake and the mythical Elden Ring, I've been talking up existing Souls-likes quite a bit. As for those upcoming, my most anticipated take on the subgenre is Cold Symmetry's Mortal Shell. Their publisher Playstack was kind enough to give me early access to the closed beta, so I've got all the fresh gameplay details for you to see how it truly stacks up. It's also been a hot minute since I used the love and hate format, so I'm resurrecting it to give you the lowdown on the best and worst of the beta's core features. I have to say though that I love nearly all of what I played, so hate may be a strong word, but hopefully it serves as a valuable breakdown of game mechanics. Without further ado, let's jump right in. My first love is getting hard. Crude, lewd humor aside, literally flexing your rock-hard bod on your enemies is one of the most satisfying spins on the subgenre that Mortal Shell has to offer. With the press of the left trigger, you transform into solid stone. In a game where making quick twitch decisions, utilizing key offensive windows, and managing evasion opportunities are all expected of you, it may seem counterintuitive to opt for tanking a single hit through standing still. But it's deceptively useful once you get a novel understanding, with mastery unlocking a whole new potential way to play. For starters, most enemies will be knocked back if they hit you at full mast. Even the bigger enemies that don't stun will still allow you to tank the damage. Not only the damage, but the stagger too. You can opt to brace yourself for the first hit of a combo to read what's coming next, then respond accordingly. It gets really satisfying when you realize you can mix it in as an emergency saving grace to mistimed rolls and attacks to save your skin. I will admit that it's hard to mix into the combat at the start, with my personal instincts leaning toward dodging first and foremost. But once you mix it in with your other tools, you can turn the tanky combat system into something you can bend to your will. How you choose to do so will be affected by my second love, the shell system. The titular mechanic is centered around you entering a husk of deceased warriors and taking on their attributes. As of the beta, 2 of the 4 shells were available. You'll start as Heros the Vassal. Think of him as your standard tank and strength build. He can put up with a lot of punishment from enemies at a slight cost to mobility and stamina. Before too long, you get access to Teal the Acolyte, a character that is nearly the opposite, loads of stamina and mobility for tissue paper defenses. If those defenses are broken in either shell, you'll get slammed out into your skinless state. For the cost of being vulnerable to a one-shot, you freeze the enemy and get a chance to reclaim your shell. If you do, it's a full HP refresh, though this knockout can only happen once per life. It's a great twist on Sekiro's resurrection mechanic. What I appreciated most though is how natural it felt to swap back and forth between the two. They feel mechanically similar to an intuitive degree, but the differences in their playstyle remain significant enough to make a difference in combat. This contrast in their strengths becomes greater when you dig into my third love, the upgrade system. As you play, you'll gain 2 items, Tars and Glimpses. Tar is the game's shared currency for buying items and upgrades, whereas Glimpses are a shared resource from defeating tough enemies that is required for upgrades, but is tied to the shell that obtains it. So if I defeat this brutish boy with the Acolyte for 1 glimpse, that goes only to him. You need quite a bit of these to get all 10 upgrades available, but they are well worth the cost. The Vassal's defenses are enhanced dramatically by reducing the hardness cooldown and even getting a bit of exit hardness as you're struck out of the state, meaning more margin for error when using it to absorb damage. He even gets passive buffs for using it more often. Basically, if you want to be rocking out like the Thing more often than not, Heros is your man. The Acolyte, on the other hand, has buffs that work toward being a relentless dodge and attack spammer. He gets a 20% chance for any damage to be taken as a hit to stamina instead of health, which synergizes beautifully with his upgrade to buff damage when low on stamina. He also gets to heal himself through poison and release clouds of it upon parrying enemies. If Cold Symmetry includes the infamously hated poison areas, he'll definitely be your go-to guy. Both of these paths create distinct advantages for certain situations and playstyles. I found that both had excellent use against all of the enemies in the beta, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what the other upgrades are that were locked away in the demo. I've mentioned parries a few times, so let's talk about my fourth love, the resolve and parry system. You can parry almost any attack in the game, which builds resolve. With 1 meter of resolve, you can unleash a powerful riposte upon a parry that not only does massive damage, but heals you as well. It's a clutch risk versus reward benefit. I love the way this plays into your defensive options. The standard quick step and dodge is what you'd expect, but even basic enemies vary attack timings greatly. This makes mixing in usage of hardness critical to success. To cap it off, though parries hold the highest risk, they offer the greatest reward. All these wrinkles constantly available within your shell add great variety to the moment-to-moment combat. Differentiation multiplied by my fifth love, the weapon variety. If there's one thing I've come to appreciate more in Soulslikes, it's the ability to swap between weapons on the fly. Though I respect the idea of tying upgrades behind consumable stones, it's really great to be able to jump from weapon to weapon with no damage penalty. In the main checkpoint area, you'll find a crypt that lets you swap between shells and weapons. There are 2 available in the beta from what I could tell, though you could pick up a third I could never figure out how to use. From what I could surmise, weapons must be swapped at these checkpoints, though there were at least consumable items to swap shells on the fly, so it's possible the same will exist for weapons. The starter weapon is your standard sword, with the second being a hammer and chisel. Both have differing combos from light to heavy attacks, including a running heavy move. They also gain unique special attacks through resolve with 2 bars. The sword gets a huge spear that pierces for insane damage, while the chisel does a fast multi-attack. It seemed the sword ultimate was the better of the 2 in terms of damage, while the hammer and chisel was overall a more flexible combat option. I enjoyed playing around with both a ton, and again really appreciated the ability to jump between them since their initial upgrades required different materials. While those materials are key items, there are loads of consumables littered around to use to your benefit. Those bonuses are increased by my 6th love, item familiarity. Simply put, using a single item a certain number of times unlocks a hidden bonus. Tar and Glimpse caches will reward extra for those familiar. Mushrooms that do poison damage initially will create an immunity from your suffering. The list goes on and on. Every single consumable has a unique benefit that matches its initial purpose. My only slight gripe is that you need to use the item once before you can even tell what it does. It's not a big deal in the grand scheme of things, but it can mean wasting a rare item at an inopportune time just to figure out its purpose. It's not so bad because you'll quickly realize that most provide combat perks, which lets you load them up in combat for the first time and hope for the best. But it will be painful for hoarders that want to save rare buffs for the right moment. There are a lot of these trial by error elements to this game, as not much is explained outside of the basic combat tutorial. That could be a downside for some, but I think many love the unexplained mysteries that surround these type of games, so for me, I dig it, especially with the familiarity aspect. We've talked plenty about what you have at your disposal, so let's go into my final true love of the day, the enemy and boss design. Though limited in the beta, I found myself liking every single enemy I came across. The basic mobs are extremely simple, which is appropriate to help you learn. They do mix in a few ranged variants, which makes you really appreciate how a well-timed hard-on can get you out of a sticky situation. The spear wielders that look sorta like a discount Gale are a lot tougher. They'll surely smack you around a bit, but they're a great test of how well you're getting used to the combat. A necessary test leading into the cave where you'll face fast imps that slash and grab, masochistic pincushions that toss swords, slash with them, then pull off their head for a poisonous explosion. Probably the only enemy I didn't like as much were these creepy red-eyed slashers. They have a hefty HP total, long combos, and insane damage. The long combos can be tough to handle if you don't take advantage of hardness, and if you rely too much on the roll instead of the quick step. Their high damaging lunge is quick steppable, but they have a chance to combo it into a string of them. If you roll, there's not enough time to evade again, meaning either rock up or die. I think it's a case of slightly overtuned damage when you take their high speed and HP into consideration, but they aren't terrible. The cherry atop the roster is the enslaved Grisha, the single boss of the beta if you don't count the tutorial hardman. Grisha can either be a blast or a headache depending on your approach. Initially, I was still underutilizing Harden and was far too roll happy. Doing this in the midst of his fisty combos will drain your HP in a flash. Once I made better use of hardness, I found I could use it to read his tells with extreme generosity and react accordingly after the first blow. That and his unblockable leaping slam is a joke to sprint around and punish. Aggression is awarded big time with a stun, though you do need to be on the lookout for periodic icicles falling from the ceiling. He's not overly complex, but his attacks can kill the Acolyte in 2 to 3 hits, whereas the Vassal can take a beating, but is left with measly stamina after avoiding all of his assaults. It took me quite a few tries to get down the parry timings, use of ultimate moves, dodging flawlessly with hardness intermixed, but once you do, it's a spectacular playground for the game's combat, without a doubt my highlight of the beta. Sadly, I do need to mention a few things I disliked. While this isn't a true hate, I have a middling bone to pick with the graphical effects. The game is gorgeous, but there are times in combat where the flashiness can be distracting. There's a lot of effects and camera shake that obscure your vision for the sake of dramatic effect. I do like these additions and think they are purposeful in trying to add an extra bit of disorientation to battle, but for my taste, I think they could be tuned down a bit. As far as significant distaste, I found only 2 issues in my time with the beta. The first is the lack of shortcuts and interconnectivity. In fairness, the devs did say this demo would be a very linear experience to keep you focused on testing the 2 shells available, but this set path is full of threats with no shortcuts to reward your progress. The entire first area is fine. It's rather small and you get a checkpoint the moment you clear it. The second area is much more claustrophobic. With speedy enemies, it can take advantage of that lack of maneuverability. Their design, as I mentioned, is great, especially when mixed with the pressure from the environment. What I don't like is that once you've cleared those hurdles, there's no shortcut to the boss at the end. At the very least, a shortcut near the end would have been appreciated. Like many Souls-likes, it is possible to sprint past most of it without much thought, but I'd rather see there be rewarding interconnectivity for casual, detailed playthroughs that aren't trying to speed their way to the end. Because even in those playthroughs, you'll have to sprint all the way to the boss if you aren't looking to fight the 15 enemies it takes to reach him every time. This could be a symptom of the beta, but it's definitely something I'll be keeping my eye on for the full release. While the lack of interconnectivity was a mild frustration and the graphical effects were dizzying enough to be notable, without a doubt my only true hated aspect of the game is the healing system. Mortal Shell for some reason ignored the past decade of innovation and went back to a system most closely comparable to Demon Souls. Healing is primarily found through pickups in the environment. Though you can heal through the resolve, parry, and repose system, that's not reliable enough for new players. Parrying and learning movesets takes a lot of practice, not to mention you need to have the resolve to spend. Though there are a few rare pickups that give a straight heal like the baguette, the primary healing source are these mushrooms. After they've been picked, there's a long cooldown before they can be picked again. This is a fair attempt at fixing a problem that Demon Souls had, being able to hoard healing. The issue I have is that these mushrooms are not instant heals, but gradual over time. Gradual at an excruciating snail's pace over 60 seconds and only restores half of your HP. Let's show how this works in an example with Grisha. Early on, I was getting whipped in the first 20 seconds until I barely had any health left. This left me with a few options. Number 1, try until I inevitably get hit once more and die since I'm still learning. Number 2, outplay my skill level and become a parry god for the HP return. And 3, slowly play Ring Around the Rosie for 2 minutes while I guzzle mushrooms. This was insanely boring. I spent more time waiting to fight than I did getting in there and learning how to fight. Think about it, who needs healing the most in a game like this? Those who are taking damage the most. New players are going to be taking damage all the time. Instead of having a replenishable healing source each time you die from a checkpoint, we've got the blood vial farming issue from Bloodborne all over again. Except in Mortal Shell, it's all environmental. Your best bet is to grab mushrooms, then wait 5 minutes for them to respawn, then grab some more, then wait 5 more minutes, then grab some more ad nauseum until you're stocked to the brim. But even when you're packing an ungodly amount of shrooms, you're still gonna get bent by the awful time to heal ratio. You have to farm it, which is boring. It takes a while to farm, which is even more boring. Then when you finally have enough, it takes ages to heal you anyway, which is absurdly frustrating. The balance in nearly all Souls-likes is that healing takes time to perform in combat. It's not a get out of jail free card, but if you manage to pull it off, you're rewarded with instant HP returns. The heals are limited in number and balanced to push the player's limits, and if you fail, you get another round of standard heals to try again. You spend time getting good instead of foraging fungus. A more traditional heal would add another wrinkle to the harden, parry, dodge, and attack combat loop that would be satisfying to pull off and forgiving to those who need it. There are loads of games that have proven that level of forgiveness doesn't make the game even close to easy with proper balance. I think Mortal Shell already has that level of polish. Nearly everything else about the game is excellent. Implementing a standard Souls-like healing system would make this game exponentially better in my eyes instantly. To me, it's the difference between this being a masochistic farming simulator and one of the best Souls-likes I've ever played. But of course, that's just my opinion. I'm eager to hear how you all received the beta and what you think of my take on its formula. If you'd like to see the beta in action from my perspective, I'll be streaming it live on Twitch following the release of this video. I hope to see you there, but either way, I want to thank you for watching today, much love to you, and I'll see you in the next video.